Blast off. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to everybody. And
Good morning.
good morning to the internet world. Oh boy, this is kind of high. Well, today is September 13th, or not September 13th, October 13th. I got to get the right month straight, I guess. We are flying through it. Today we're going to be talking about the power of myth. Joseph Campbell. How many of you have read the book or know a lot of it? Okay. It's been out for quite a long time. It was actually taken from a PBS special, and the book was written from that, but that PBS special came out, I believe, in 86 or maybe 87. And Joseph Campbell died pretty quickly after that interview. I don't know how old he was. Do you remember, Dan? He was quite elderly.
Yeah, he was in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
We have the book and the special.
Oh, do you? Yeah, I love watching it. It's so fun to watch that anyway. But I always say, if you really want to learn something, to teach it. And I have had this on my shelf literally for decades, and would open it up, and read a little bit, and then just put it back on the shelf. And because I have hundreds of books that I haven't read yet, and I guess when the time is right, it comes, doesn't it? Because when I picked it up and said, okay, it's time now. And good morning, John. There's a pamphlet on the back table there. When I picked it up, it resonated with me so strongly. And of course, I had watched the interview at least half of it twice, and so I was familiar with the interview. But there's so much more to it when I can really break it down and read it slowly, go over it, and I really absorbed that. So let's go ahead and get started with meditation, if we can. Just make yourself comfortable if you want to. I invite you to close your eyes. Just feel your presence, feel your body. And in order to just be here now the most, just let your body relax. Sometimes we don't know how much tension we put in that thing we call the body. But just let your forehead and your eyebrows just totally relax. Your jaw, just let it go. Let all the muscles in your face, your neck, down to your shoulders. Release that tension. Take away all the thoughts that have been going through your mind over the days. And just be present. Through your torso, your hips, your arms. Let them go. Down through your legs, your feet. Feel that energy now flowing through the top part of your head like a river of love flowing through you, flowing from the top down into the earth. That river is here to help you. It's here to give you all that infinity that you absolutely have absolutely deserve. You are one with all. You always have, and you always will be. And thank you, God, for all of us here. Namaste. Good morning, Zach. Good morning, Brenda. There's a pamphlet on the back table here. Good morning, Sue. Yeah, for everybody. So, there's 7 chapters in this book, plus an introduction. I'm going to try and do this in 3 different parts. I've got to get this thing down. I don't know how to do it. Or maybe it's already locked in place. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to stand then. Okay. So we're going to cover really the introduction and the first chapter. And I've gone through the book and really highlighted the things that I really loved. And then from that, I condensed that even more and more and more to where I got down to 1 question and 1 answer, maybe once out of every 15 questions, and put together what I thought was, to me anyway, the most important stuff for my understanding. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with myth here. This is from the intro. What is myth? Well, no, I put this together. I looked in the dictionary. And one of the first definitions I got to was a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural things or events. And then I looked at another dictionary definition. A myth is a set of stories or beliefs about a particular person, institution, or situation, especially when it's exaggerated or fictitious. Okay. So I've always had this kind of a mishmash of feelings about what a myth is, what is mythology. And let's try and keep our answers succinct, but what is it that you feel, what is a myth to you? What's mythology? Go ahead, Dan, first.
Well, the earliest communication was storytelling. For generations and centuries, there was stories handed down through storytelling, in which the knowledge and wisdom of the person telling the story would convey what they recalled or remembered from the past and incorporated that into what they thought it meant and going forward from my vantage point. So the storytelling initially was the precursor, I think, to what became of myths. When you look at almost all indigenous populations, the idea of myths and legends that were incorporated into what people thought and knew, even before writing, before the written word, was, I think, always conveyed through storytelling. And the great storytellers of the day were the ones that could convey that myth.
Great, thanks, Dan. John, could you pass it around? There are a couple other hands here. Go ahead and give your name too, so everybody knows you.
My name is Christopher. I go by Kipper.
Keep the microphone close to you.
Oh, I see. Okay. So one of the things that I always thought when I think of myths is like Hercules or anything from the Greek mythology. So how powerful Hercules has actually supposedly was, and strength and his accomplishments and everything. And now, to stretch out what between the myth and the man is kind of, do I believe that Hercules was actually a person that was real? I think he may have been like copied off of a different person that we believe, like Samson. Samson and Hercules might have actually been the same person. So the concept of both superhuman strength, like powers that God gave Samson without him just telling him not to cut his hair at one point. So, but other than that, yeah, the things between myths, and then you also had Aesop's fables, which were myths, but they also had true like morals that came from Aesop's
Okay.
fables.
Good, thanks. Anybody else? All right.
I was going to say that,
Oh, go ahead.
I see myths as being aspects of who we are. They're stories that reflect humanness, our psyche,
Mhm.
our beliefs, God, whatever, creation, the whole. I mean,
Yeah.
myths are of creation, so it's our story.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, John. Keep that with you because I'm going to let you pass it around to people. I kind of came up with mine. I think I put it on the paper here. Myth can be somewhere between truth, a parable, a story that reflects what an author or culture is trying to historically or emotionally convey. It might have no truth, but exists to position knowledge, spiritual insight, or emotion. These go back, as Dan said, before the time of maybe even any sort of written language. These go back to oral language. It goes back to the paintings on the cave walls and the stories that we have from culture, from people that have just been passed along. And I can only think in my mind, when before writing, everything was oral. So they passed that down in whatever language that they spoke. And have you ever told a story about something that happened to you, and then the next time you tell it, you embellish it a little bit, maybe you leave out a few things, you add a few things, and it just keeps building on itself. And then other people hear that story, and it might be so incredible that they build on it, and before you know it, in time, that story has maybe something very different than what it really was, but it may have tried to convey that of the awesome. And I kind of see that as maybe how myths possibly began, or at least some of them. So anyway, that's how I see it anyway. So on your page it says introduction. Why do we need mythology? Remnants of all Greek god stuff and so much more like line the walls of our interior system of belief like shards of broken pottery in an archaeological site. There's energy in all that stuff. Rituals evoke it. Consider the position of judges in our society, which Campbell saw in mythological, not sociological terms of this position or just role. So the judge could wear a gray suit to the court instead of the magisterial black robe. And in England, and to this day, I believe they still wear that gray wig, don't they? They put that gray wig on. Okay, and everybody is supposed to stand, right, when the judge comes in. Are they standing because of that person, or are they standing there because of the role that that person plays? Well, that role that that person plays is really the mythology that we're following. It's not that you might not even know the name of that person. You may not even know if he or she holds good ethical or moral values. We hope so, but that role is played by the mythology of that role. And Campbell was talking about that judge when he walks in the room, everybody stands up, and because of that. And then he goes on to say, if you think of kings and queens and the monarchy, some of these people might not be so bright, and they may be absurd in many ways. And we've seen a lot of the drama that has gone on in the monarchy in England, haven't we? And yet that is still so powerful, especially to the people in England, but even to the people here in the U.S., because that's kind of a lot of our foundation goes back to Europe. And that monarchy played out in all of Europe, and so people are really still feeling some emotional or maybe even ethical values from that which the monarchy stands for right now. I don't know what your opinion of the monarchy is. I know what mine is. I'm not going to go into that at all. But it still exists. It's still a big part of our culture. It's still a big part of our understanding of how the world evolves. And like it or not, it's there. And so that is the mythology. Okay. If you look at number 2 there under introduction, it says, our computers, our tools, our machines are not enough. We have to rely on intuition. That's not what the hero's journey is about. It's not to deny reason. To the contrary, by overcoming the dark passions, the hero symbolizes our ability to control the irrational savage within us. Joseph Campbell really affirmed, and he said this, that life is an adventure. And, so I'm trying to think, how does mythology serve us? And he's saying that it's by our life being an adventure. And I know when one time, this was before Sue and I were together, I was traveling on the Natchez Trace Parkway, and I was by myself, and I stopped into the Lewis Meriwether Memorial on the Natchez Trace Parkway. And I was just kind of doing a meditation there, and it just was so powerful. And it just came to me that life is an adventure. And so there's something to that for myself anyway, that everything we do, everything we think, it's a creation, and it's coming down maybe even from something so much more powerful than we are. But it's that adventure that we actually have some say in. And mythology helps us, I think, with that, understanding our own adventure. So, number 3, I'm gonna try and get us all to be a little bit more participants, and also to get some answers here. And yet we have to keep it a little bit short. Could someone read number 3 under the introduction? Otherwise, John, go ahead if you would. Where it says Jesus had the eye.
Jesus had the eye. He said, from the Gospel of John, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit.
Okay. Does anybody have kind of a thought about what Jesus may have been saying there? Go ahead, Don.
I think he really is referring to the cyclic nature of what we're into here.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting back to the myth. I think it's an attempt to intensify our meaning of life that springs out of our imagination
Right.
when we tell another story.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah.
I also,
Okay, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I also think it means that you have to let go of something before you can receive something new.
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Also, it leads to rebirth. I think that is
Yeah.
a central key core to what the meaning is. It in itself dies,
Right.
but at the same time, it never dies
Yeah.
because it is eternal.
Yeah.
So therefore, it sprouts into something else.
Yeah.
There's something new.
Thanks. I love that. Yeah, I see that to me as life is given. We give life by dying. We're completely, constantly. I think our lives are such a speck in time, aren't they? And yet we think back, eons ago. That was their life right at that moment, and yet they're so far removed, and yet we still we still have that life, going on. Go ahead, Brenda.
Well, with what Jesus said about the wheat, I think he means that if you leave the wheat seed in the sack and don't plant it, it's never going to produce anything.
Yeah,
You got to plant the seed for it to produce.
right, okay. Falls to the earth, and then it dies, and then it is rebirth.
Getting back to this dying thing, when you ask the scientists, they'll tell you that we have millions of cells dying all the time.
Yeah, it's true.
And we have millions of cells being produced all the time. So it's more of a cyclic thing.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think. I love thinking about, gosh, who is this body? And it really is composed of all those infinite number of cells that are going on. That's a world in itself going on inside of us.
Well, one of the things that I've experienced in my own journey at this time is that I go through a period of time where I go through an experience, and then I gain new understanding and new knowledge, and I reach a point, and so maybe in phase one, there was something that worked really well for me in phase one. But when I come to the end of phase one, ready to go into phase two, sometimes I find out that the very things that helped me and were my support in phase one are the things I have to let go of in order to move to the next step.
Good point.
And the mythology of it, why it's kind of not real solid in this world, is because none of that is real solid. One of the messages right now I'm getting is saying, are you willing to let go of dearly held values in order to practice the principles that you know are true? So that's
Thanks for breaking that down, Wendy. I love that. From James Joyce, the secret cause of all suffering is mortality itself. Isn't it said, I think, that death is the greatest, or the second greatest fear? And one time they took a survey and they said, what's your greatest fear? I think the fear of public speaking was number one, actually. But then the second one. But I honestly believe that probably the fear of death. I mean, we do have to, we do think about that. There's no question about it. And I think when we see someone that is so important to us or so close to us that leaves us, it starts us wondering about that mortality itself, for ourselves, but also for, our family, It cannot be denied if life is to be affirmed. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Can someone read number 4 in the introduction? Let's see.
The images of God are many, he said, calling them the masks of eternity that both cover and reveal the face of glory. He wanted to know what it means that God assumes such different masks in different cultures, yet how it is that comparable stories can be found in these divergent traditions. The stories of creation, of virgin birth, incarnations, death and resurrection, second comings and judgment days. He liked the insight of the Hindu scripture. Truth is one. The sages call it by many names. He said that myths are clues to our deepest spiritual potential, able to lead us to delight, illumination, and even rapture.
Oh, thank you. And I think one of the things he said when he was getting started in studying myths, he started, of course, he started out in a kind of a traditional Christian, Roman Catholic, I believe, education. And so he learned all those things that many of us have learned, in Old Testament mythology. And then he started studying other, I think the second one was Native American Indian culture. And after that, Hindu culture. And what he saw with all these mythologies from all of these different cultures and religions is, oh, gee, they all share very, very similar mythologies. It's just, and maybe they're not even looking at each other, but I think he, as far as I know, he was one of the very first, if not the first, to actually start teaching courses on comparable mythology.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at Campbell's beginnings. I think if you consider the ideas of impermanence, and I think that's really the key, one of the key focal points of what he saw at the very beginning, that regardless of the path, while we're here, there's a sense of impermanence because there's a continuation of spirit.
Good.
And I think that's what he saw, and myth tied into that, and how people coalesced around different spiritual ideas that he was able to expand on, that made him such a valuable contributor to why people were attracted to his books and everything else that he did. Was this continuation that we were all basically on, we're on the same path, but just different ways of getting there.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I think of that, I think of the golden rule. You've probably seen, you know, some comparisons on the golden rule in all the different religions, in all the different cultures, and every major religion, every major culture has the golden rule as one of their key stamps, you know, in their culture, in their religion. And they may be worded just a little bit differently, but it's all the same thing. It's all the golden rule. Chapter 1, Myth and the Modern World, and this is where we start the questions and answers. I'm going to be Bill Moyers. I'm going to ask the question, and I want someone to read what Campbell says. So let's go to number 5. Bill Moyers, why myths? Why should we care about myths? What do they have to do with my life?
Go on, live your life. It's a good life. You don't need mythology, but you may find that with a proper introduction, mythology will catch you. One of our problems today is that we are not well acquainted with the literature of the spirit. We're interested in the news of the day and the problem of the hour. Greek and Latin and biblical literature used to be a part of everyone's education. These bits of information from ancient times, which have to do with the themes that have supported human life, built civilizations, and informed religions over the millennia, have to do with deep inner problems, inner mysteries, and inner threshold of passage.
Oh, thank you, John. You know, one thing that I remember when I was in elementary school, even in middle school or junior high school, they taught Latin back then. I don't know if anybody took Latin. I didn't, but it was required. It wasn't required. It wasn't elective in almost every school, I think, or you know, at least some of the larger schools. Go ahead, Kip.
Well, in our school we had like Greek mythology, so it's like we were able to take Greek mythology. That's how it had Hercules and everything like that. But nowadays, I don't even think they even have the Greek mythology.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that I don't even know that they teach Latin in very many of the early grades. But and of course, I think they probably do in at least some colleges and universities.
Well, if you're in choir, actually, they do teach a little bit of Latin because most of the songs that they sing are in Latin. So
that's true.
They have to teach the Latin, and you have to understand what you're singing about. So if you're in choir, if you're like in the music programs, they still teach the Latin there. Yeah. So Latin is a little bit more diversified to that point, where in the Greek mythology, all you're doing is like seeing it and find it in movies or anything like that.
Okay. Thanks. Quickly, anybody else want to say anything regarding this topic? Why do we need this? Well, he's saying we don't. But if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand maybe why it is that we do what we do, think what we think, that was actually her first.
Sorry. No, I feel like the mythology gives us an opportunity. I mean, we are a few thousand years into being deeply programmed to be small and incapable, like with that, not to have power.
Yeah.
And I think these myths give us an idea of possibilities of what are we, all things are possible. All things are, I feel like it gives us that,
Yeah. That reason.
the possibility and the feeling of power and a beautiful message to go with it. And I also heard, I listened to, it's Deepak Chopra. There's a healing thing I've been listening to, and it's the sutras.
Okay.
You just like listen for 15 minutes a day. But in one of the sutras, it says like an enlightened, the key to self-healing is the same key to enlightenment. And that one who's enlightened sees death as an opportunity to recreate oneself.
Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, go ahead. You want to say
sorry.
something?
What I do when I think mythology is, as a writer myself, I look at it as inspiration. So I actually look at these kind of things. All right, what kind of characters can I make? What kind of stories can I actually come up with and absolutely build my own background? And so I'm starting to think that I'm starting my own mythology. Sorry, the word's hard. Get out. Mythological world where I actually have control and I can actually inspire. And if I can inspire somebody, that would be entirely wonderful. And great idea.
Well,
Thank you.
In many ways, there are a connection to antiquity. And I think that's a simple focus to follow.
Right.
What he was saying is that antiquity that we all are a part of, it's a matter of remembering. And what they do is they help us to remember the past. And I think that's a central core to what myths and what Joseph Campbell speaks to.
That's foundational. Thanks for saying that. Don had a hand up there.
Also, this gives us an opportunity to catalog where we fit into this thing. The idea of Jung's main thesis that everything falls into our archetypes. We have the archetype of the hero, the villain, the mother, father. They all have common characteristics, and it allows us to see them in a particular light, and it gives us the impetus to put our little add our little part into the story that we're being told.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm going to read number 6, Bill Moyers, and who wants to read okay, good, Zach. Bill Moyers, number 6. I came to understand from reading your books that what human beings have in common is revealed in myths. Myths are stories of research through the ages for truth, for meaning, for significance. We all need to understand death and to cope with death, and we all need help in our passage from birth to life and then to death.
What we're seeing is an experience of being alive. Myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities and the human life rapture. That which is associated with being alive is what it's all about.
Wow, that's big to me. Any thoughts, any comments, questions? Does it hit you the same way it hits me? Myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life rapture. How many of you see your life, at times at least, in rapture? Think about that.
Well, I think if you see life as a continuum, is really the simple core of I think most belief, because combining the ability to see beyond the present is really a central part of that. Because while you may acknowledge the past, live in the present, but you also have a sense of what is beyond. Seeing beyond the present means that death is a transformation to something else.
Yeah.
And I think that is in most indigenous populations over time.
Yeah.
Thousands of years, death was not the end.
Yeah.
It was only a way to move on to and beyond who you presently who you are now.
It makes me think about, because I think you're right. I think in most cultures, especially before maybe our modern European culture, I think they did see life as not ending here, as it went on to something different, something better, whatever. And now, we think, some people think, well, that's just the end, and it's just nothing after that. But I think that's kind of a new concept, really.
Halloween, hello.
What's that?
Halloween,
Yeah.
hello. The other thing I was going to say, Don brought up C.T. Young and C.J. Young, and when I first read Man and the Symbols when I was in high school, and the archetypes and the cross culture, because he really went cross culturally like Joseph Campbell did too, and you end up with realizing all the similarities, but also the possibilities that
Yeah.
when we're just being just integrated into our own specific culture, our own little community that we live in, that we have all these limitations that we're told, and I think that this is an opportunity to go, whoa.
I think one of the central teachings of Fillmore.
Hey, hang on, we gotta.
I think one of the central teachings of Unity at Fillmore was the ability to see beyond the present and his acknowledgement of who we are and what is our path, and are we moving in the direction of our soul's intent. And I think that was the key focus of what I've gotten from Unity for over 25 years, was the fact that the Fillmores felt that there was a continuation, a continuum, and we were part of that. And that was always a focal point of what Unity tried to convey, that we are here to move it into light, and that's what we try to do.
Thanks, Tim. Go ahead, Brenda was first, and then we'll go to Wendy.
On Rick Steve's Europe on PBS, he's always showing about the pyramids and the way they was constructed, where they would have a hallway passageway from where they put the body to the outside, so that they believed that when they died, that their spirit would have a way out into the
Thanks.
to the hereafter.
Thanks, Brenda. Wendy. And then we got to move on to the next one.
Well, a purpose for understanding this is in our own lives. When my grandmother passed, it was like, and when any bad things happened, my role was caretaker. My role was, and I have a sister that her role in the family is the bad sister. Okay. But because I could understand these principles and stuff, when my mother had a bad accident and it took years of healing, and my sister stepped up in the caretaker role, because I could understand this, I could see it, and I could step back and let her have that experience and move to a different experience.
Wow. Thank you. I love all this comments. I mean, it gives so much to me. I'm going to skip number 7 just because of time. You can read that one on your own later. Number 8, Moyers. What do you think the mythology, the stories they're going to hear from you, do for them? Someone read Campbell number 8, please.
They are stories about the wisdom of life. What we're learning in our schools is not the wisdom of life. We are learning technologies. We're getting information.
Okay, and you got to remember, this was said 40 years ago before computers were even that popular, before we had the age of the flip phone or even, not to mention the smartphone. This was the age before all of the technologies that we've had in the last 40 years. He's seeing that we're going towards technology, right? If I was a teacher before I did my own business, and that was a long time ago that I was teaching, back then I could see the trend was going away from some of the arts, some of those things that are so valuable to understanding who we are, and rather they're going to just filling occupations, filling a job, filling roles, for money.
That's one of the reasons why I'm afraid, they're taking music programs out of schools and also
they were doing right and left.
Like taking like academics out of school or something like that. Actually focusing on intelligent classes and everything like that. But they don't realize that intelligence and wisdom are two different ideals.
Absolutely.
And you can have intelligence. You can have a really intelligent person. Anyone that's actually played Dungeons and Dragons knows that you can have a really intelligent wizard, but if he doesn't have the wisdom to back up his intelligence, his spells can probably go absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So you have to have both the intelligence and the wisdom to actually know exactly what.
Good comment, and I think that's what Campbell is trying to say. It's the stories about the wisdom of life. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, Brenda, real quick, and then I'm going to move on.
Well, I just learned yesterday that watching a video that there's some of these new farm equipment that they don't even print a paper repair manual anymore. It's all
on digital
computer because the technology changes so fast that it would be impractical to have it in paper form.
Yeah, great. Number 9, Moyers. Do you remember the first time you discovered myth? Who wants to read Campbell's response? Done. Or I guess we'll go D. Okay.
I was brought up as a Roman Catholic. I was brought up in terms of the seasonal relationships of the cycle of Christ coming into the world, teaching in the world, dying, resurrecting, and returning to heaven. So I began to read American myths, and it wasn't long before I found the same motifs in the American Indian stories that I was being taught by the nuns at school. That was the beginning of my interest in comparative mythology. Later, I became interested in Hinduism, and there were the same stories again. The themes are timeless, and the inflection is to the culture.
Does that give us any thought or any clue to, our own beginnings, our own how the Torah was written, how the Old Testament was written, how the New Testament was written?
Well, really, before you even get to that, almost everybody in our culture is introduced to Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That's the first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you so much for reading that, Dee. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and move on just because of time. Number 10. Okay, Moyers doesn't start out here on number 10. Let's have someone read number 10. Dan, thank you.
Do you want to read what Campbell said?
Yeah, just read Campbell.
The virtues of the past are the vices of today. The old-time religion belongs to another age, another people, another set of human values, another universe. By going back, you throw yourself out of sync with history, or kids lose their faith in the religions they were taught to them, and they go inside.
Often with the help of a drug. Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, The mechanically induced mystical experience is what you have there. The difference is that the one who cracks up is drowning in the water in which the mystic swims. You have to be prepared for this experience. Everyone who is going to go on this expedition has to make a complete confession of all the faults of his or his recent living. And if they don't, the magic is not going to work.
Thank you so much, Dan. Has anybody gone through counseling before? And if so, if you have, if you don't admit to yourself what's going on, what's really going on, and you don't dig deep, you don't get into the faults or how whatever you're exhibiting, how successful is your counseling going to be? Wendy.
One of the things, the group that I did Firewalk with, one of the part of the ritual to prepare for that in that group was we had to get with another person and tell our deepest shames to another person.
Wow.
Before and he said, if you aren't willing to do that, you're probably not going to be aware enough to walk the fire and not get burned.
Wow, that's powerful.
So I am a part of AA, and in that 12-step, the fourth step is to sit down and you write your resentments, and you write all the things that you've never admitted to anyone, the things you've done in your past, and that is the fifth step, is to share that. It's to let all of that go so you can be new and open.
Yeah.
And not only that you do that one time, but it's something that you continue to do through your life, taking that inventory and, dealing with it, releasing it.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was very, very valuable comment. Okay, I'm going to move on to number 11. I'm Moyers. Somebody be Campbell. I have become death, the destroyer of worlds, J. Robert Oppenheimer said when he saw the first atomic bomb explode. But you don't think that will be our end, do you? Bruce Campbell.
It won't be the end. Maybe it will be the end of life on this planet, but that is not the end of the universe. It is just a bungled explosion in terms of all the explosions that are going on, and all the suns are of the universe. The universe is a bunch of exploding atomic furnaces like our sun. So this is just a little imitation of the whole big job.
There's a lot there, and there's a lot of thought there. How many people have seen the movie Oppenheimer? Did anybody besides, I know Sue and I did. If you haven't seen it, it's a phenomenal movie.
But good.
What's that? It is, yes, it is. But I think it won, I believe it won Picture of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, or at least it was nominated. I know that. But go ahead.
I just find that the power of nature. And you look at what happened in Florida the last few weeks, and all the people that were so adversely affected by that.
Yeah.
But you look to what they built, and then what now exists as nature. And you think of nature prevailing when we are gone.
Yeah.
When the human aspect is no longer present, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Some of these locations. In South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. It's amazing how the nature recovers.
Yeah, true.
Itself.
They say that we're.
And I think that's a central thing you have to understand, that nature is prevalent here.
Yeah, they say that we're in the sixth life here on Earth. That this is from science. I'm not making this up. Things that I've read from different papers, but that life has come and left, come back again, and we're in our sixth cycle now. And how they know this, I don't know. But I tend to believe it. I tend to believe that things have happened. You think about a meteor hitting the Earth, they say that was the extinction of the dinosaurs. That was one of them, And so it's pretty phenomenal to think that, but there could be a time, and there will be a time, the sun's not going to last forever, right? So we're not going to last forever. But Go ahead.
Then, if you actually look at the Bible, it actually says the second one was the flood, which Noah was the only one to rescue the animals
Right.
while the world was being destroyed. So at that particular point, you have two recorded things for disasters that actually destroy the earth at least twice.
Or is the story of the flood in the Bible a myth that says this is what happened? This is one of these truths, even if it's not historically accurate. That is part of the way the universe works.
Yeah. I tend to think that a lot of the stories that are created, that have been told in the Bible, are not actually from a historical standpoint, but from more of a mythological. Now that I may, there may be a lot that are absolutely right on, and then there's some that may be, mythological. I'm going to go on to number 12. Again, I'm just thinking of time here. Number 12, Moyers. After our youngest son had seen Star Wars for the 12th or 13th time, I said, "Why do you go so often?" And he said, "For the same reason you have been reading the Old Testament all your life." He was in a new world of myth. Who might be Campbell? Go ahead, Brenda.
Certainly, Star Wars has a valid methodological perspective. It shows the state as a machine and ask, is the machine going to crush humanity or so humanity comes not from the machine but from the heart?
Okay, great. Any thoughts on that one real quick? Is technology going to save us? Is it going to be our demise? Is somewhere in between?
Well, with
Again,
this,
I think she had her hand up. I'm not sure.
Well, I think possibly these myths are to start to clue in humanity about how expansive we are, how expansive oneness is into our galactic family, into the cosmos
Right.
that maybe and other mythology hadn't quite reached in that way, in a modern way.
Yeah. Go ahead.
well, with this one, I think of like two robotics, one to help and one to disastrous, and then one I think of HAL 3000 from Space Odyssey, and then I think of Wally from Wally, and both of those, it could be either way. Like Wally was a robot who actually helped save the planet, versus Hal, who was always a maniacal computer who was trying to destroy humanity on its thing.
And I think of, I have two family members that are just, well, one was a very close friend of mine, the other one's a family member. And Star Trek was like a religion to these people, as well as Star Wars is to many people. Actually, this interview took place on George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch, because George Lucas was actually writing a mythology, and that turned out to be Star Wars. And that is kind of the mythology for our modern age for a lot of people, I think. Is technology going to destroy us, or is it going to benefit us? Number 13, someone be Campbell here. Number 13, Moyers. But haven't some of the greatest saints borrowed from anywhere they could? They have taken from this and from that and constructed a new software.
That is what is called the development of a religion. You can see it in the Bible. In the beginning, God was simply the most powerful God among many. He is just a local tribal God. And then in the 6th century, when Jews were in Babylon, the notion of the world Savior came in, and the biblical divinity moved to a new dimension. You can keep the old tradition going only by renewing the terms in certain circumstances. In the period of the Old Testament, the world was a little 3-layer cake consisting of a few hundred miles around the nearest eastern centers. No one had ever heard of the Aztecs or even the Chinese. When the world changes, the religions had been transformed.
Right. I think that's a very powerful thought is, we can understand something like the Old Testament, all these stories that, coming from the Torah, from the Old Testament, even the New Testament, if we understand some of the real history, the archaeology, everything behind all of that.
Well, when you look at Eastern thought and you look at how Buddhism and the sutras came into Xi'an and how they were translated by the Taoists, and how the three came together between Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and how that combination of the three was able to, over 3,000 years, was able to coalesce around a central understanding as to how all three fit together. And I think and I think a lot of what Campbell talked about to segue from the idea of the Old and New Testament and Western thought into what really made his writing and books and everything so effective is he was able to incorporate a lot of that Eastern thought, particularly Hinduism, which he was naturally attracted to, into an overall belief system that they were all connected, that they all came together. And I think that was the power of Campbell's teaching.
Thanks, Ken.
And I think an example of that too is that the three wise men story in the birth of Christ is an image of saying, oh, this is also of the Eastern thought, and that I think was reflected in a lot of his teachings, even though it took a while before people kind of figured that out.
Well, we have 3 minutes left. I'm going to skip number 15. I ask that you do read that because it's pretty powerful. But let's go on to number 16. What is a myth? The dictionary definition of a myth would be stories about gods. So then you have to ask the next question. What is a god? A god is a personification of a motivating power or a value system that functions in human life and in the universe. The powers of your own body and of nature, the myth, you know what, I'm reading Campbell. Oh, well, that's okay. The myths are metaphorical and spiritual potentiality in the human being, and the same powers that animate our life animate the life of the world. There are two totally different orders in mythology. There is the mythology which relates to your nature in the natural world, of which you're a part, and there is the mythology that is strictly sociological, linking you to a particular society. You're not simply a natural man. You are a member of a particular group. The biblical tradition is a socially oriented mythology. Nature is condemned. When nature is thought of as evil, you don't put yourself in accord with it. You control it, or try to, and hence the tension, the anxiety, the cutting down forests, the annihilation of native people. So I think there's the conflict that he's saying there. There's two different kinds of mythology, the nature mythology and then the sociological mythology. And obviously, everything we learned early on, I think, in our European culture, in the Bible, is taking that sociological mythology. And if you look at it compared to maybe tribal mythology or tribal cultures, we have a conflict, don't we? So, we're about ready. We've got 1 minute here. Any comments? Thank you for passing around the basket, John. Any other? Oh, you want to read that?
Either way.
Okay, go ahead, John.
All right. These are the announcements. The practical prayer Energy for Healing is canceled for today. It will resume next month. Also, the grief group is suspended during the period of the small groups on Monday evenings. If anyone has any concerns, please contact me, and the office has my phone. Meditation is tonight at 6 p.m. and is open to everyone. Small groups start this week, so today is the last day to sign up. The book we'll be studying is Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. We have 4 people signed up to host. Take a look at the days and times for each and sign up for the one that works best for you. November 1st to November 31st, we run a crisis cold weather shelter. That means that when the overnight temperature is forecasted below 32 degrees, we open our doors for 25 or more people to come in and sleep. And we need your help. We're having a shelter volunteer meeting this Tuesday, October 15th at 6 p.m. This meeting is for current and new volunteers. If you're on the fence about volunteering, please come and hear about what it's all about. There's no obligation to sign up. If you want to help but don't know what you could do, please come to this meeting. It's well worth your time and energy and focus. It's a wonderful experience to be a volunteer. We have chair yoga classes every Thursday at 9 a.m. This is a combination of stretching, exercise, and yoga. Everyone is invited and welcome, and the cost is $8 per session. Everyone who is attending absolutely loves it. The map makers are meeting every Thursday at 10 a.m. This group weaves sleeping mats out of plastic bags, which are then donated to folks who are unsheltered. The mats provide a waterproof barrier between them and the ground when they sleep. Their goal is to make 100 mats in 100 days, and they would love your help. The Unity Drum Circle meets the first and third Thursday each month. Join us this Thursday, October 10th at 6:30 p.m. Wow, that was last week. If not, the church has extra to borrow. So there are drums.
It will be this week.
So what? But it's not the 10th.
Oh yeah, it's past the 10th,
Yeah,
so but it'll be still.
It's this, so it is this Thursday. Okay. Next Sunday is the 9:15 New Thought and World Religion Adult Education class. Paul Day will present The First Storytellers in the Hero's Adventure by Joseph Campbell. Is that the second passage?
Yeah, it'll be second and third chapters.
Okay. We are beginning the 6th week of our 8 items in 8 week shelter donation drive. We've selected 8 items, which are things we use a lot in our cold weather shelter. The 8 weeks are leading up to the start of the shelter season. The item for today was cup of soups, and the item for next week is toilet paper. If you don't like to shop, we have an Amazon wish list, and you can order all 8 items, and they'll be shipped to the church.
Thanks for the announcements, John. Thanks for all your participation. I absolutely love that. And we're going to be talking about this again next week, and then there's going to be other classes after that. So let's go ahead and get in circle in the back if we could. Okay. Continuing on, pass it on, people you meet this week, and just have an overall great Sunday, great
I make a dollhouse.
I made many just regular ones, but I decided I wanted to do a haunted house doll.
Oh, that's so great.
So start putting the back to it. So the mother is a witch, and the father is a Dracula, and the little boy is a werewolf.
Oh my god.
And the little girl is a ghost. And we have so awesome. The other dolls, I have most of the dolls almost all done. But just to give an idea. The only thing I got to do is make the cake for the Dracula.
It's just awesome.
He's the father.
Oh my god.
And so I'm making him a cake that then will wrap around him. And then he can hang from this.
Oh, that's amazing.
Hang from this thing. So this is for, so that when you're regular or the mirror on the wall.
Oh, that's so cool.
Your turn. And if you look here, the dog, this is Grandpa, who's got his black hair, gray hair, and he's a werewolf like, and then this is Grandma.
Oh my gosh, this is so cool.
So, and then there'll be toys that are in here. Then I'm making a couple of books here.
It's really great.
And this you can take the fire off, just have it not, and then when you're ready to do it,
Who are you making this for?
Well, I'm making one. We have a daughter who loves horror. Honestly, just say, you need to be high spiritual. I've never seen a more highly spiritual person than when she's watching horror movies. She is so connected.
Yeah, I don't connect with that. I'm scared.
Yeah, I'm not in a lot of them either. There's a lot I've never even done. So one of them is for her. She'll be 65.
Okay.
But she, when she heard I was making that, she made her a birdhouse that is based,
That's so funny.
So one for that, and then the other one I don't know. I've been contemplating doing one, putting it in a silent option.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
But anyway, it's just so it has lots of fun. So the boy, this is his. He has a dog.
Oh, okay.
Werewolf.